Right now, the Chinese are buying up gold by the pallet, preparing for something big in the global currency markets. Today, a story completely missed by the media and even gold analysts is China's 7,000-year-old strategy to acquire gold for pennies on the dollar. The financial press has barely scratched the surface of China's gold hoard. The real secret to their gold accumulation will one day shock the world. The Chinese aren't the only ones using this strategy. So are some of the wealthiest investors on earth, accelerating their gold accumulation with one of the oldest businesses known to mankind. Learn more about China's real gold accumulation strategy at futuremoneytrends.com/China strategy.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome into CrushTheStreet.com. My name is Kenneth Amaduri, and I got a special guest today. His name is Dave, and he's with X22report.com. That's his website, and you can also check him out at his very popular YouTube channel, X22Report. He has an excellent manner in which he uncovers the truth and facts regarding the economy. Dave, thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
Dave, I want to start off by talking about something. You know, there are a lot of thoughts out there about what will be the catalyst for the economic collapse. And you recently did a video titled Market Doomsday Clock is 1 minute to midnight. And I was curious, what do you see as the final nail in the coffin? And maybe you could just share a little bit about what was in that video with us.
Okay. Well, I'm going to try to do this in a summarized version. But there's not just one thing that's going to happen. There's many different things that are coming down the pike here. And we're starting to see all of them occur all at the same time. Now, of course, as we know, the U.S. government, the Fed, their corporate media, they're continually telling us that we're in a recovery, that everything is fantastic. And they give us these statistical numbers. They tell us that everything is fine. And when we drill down and we really look past the headlines, because they love giving great headlines, you know, like mortgage applications are up, automobile sales are better than ever. But when you go into the meat of really what's happening, you see that things aren't as good as they are saying. Now, I put out the video about the doomsday clock. It's 1 minute to midnight. And basically, this is coming out of the Telegraph. And they looked at the situation of what is going on here in the world, not just here in the United States, and they picked out 8 different things. I mean, they talk about the China slowdown, how we've been seeing China slow down. They devalued the yuan, and we're starting, and this was to help their exports, because what's happening here in the United States and many countries, we're basically not buying as much as we used to, and things are starting to fall apart. They also went down the list explaining how commodity is basically collapsing right now. The Bloomberg Global Commodity Index, which tracks about 22 commodity prices, fell to levels last seen at the beginning of this century. And then they went into the resource sector and on and on and on about how interest rates then are going to basically shock the entire economy. So we understand the Fed is looking at an interest rate hike. We see that all these different things are happening all at once. And it really fits into a geopolitical, I'm looking for the right word here, type of situation. And things are happening here in the United States, they're happening in Europe, they're happening in Canada, in Australia, New Zealand, and all of this is being driven by central banks. Now, in my reports, I always say what we're seeing right now in the U.S. economy, in the European economy, is not a people's economy. The people aren't going out there purchasing, they're not going out there and investing, they're not going out there and buying homes. Basically, what's happening is these central banks are doing this right now, and they're inflating the bubbles. So when we say the doomsday clock has hit 1 minute to midnight, we're seeing all of these things now starting to happen all at once. And there are so many different economic indicators that are occurring right now, it's hard to look past them. And I talk about retail, how it's contracting. I talk about real estate, how what they're saying right now doesn't match up to what's really going on, and how mortgage applications are falling and how housing prices are starting to come down. I also talk about how unemployment numbers are not really where they are. Yes, these numbers are manipulated. Of course, they're telling us they're at 5.3%, and we're not seeing the benefit from the 5.3% unemployment because it's not a real number. And when we look at all of these things together, we're seeing that this economy is really not going where President Obama is telling us it's going, where the Fed thinks it's going. It's really going absolutely nowhere. It's just one bubble after another, and sooner or later, all these bubbles are going to pop.
It's really interesting how everything is coming together all at one time. But talking about interest rates, do you tend to think that interest rates will go up in the near future like they're hinting, or are we going to see extended long periods of low interest rates or even possibly negative interest rates in the near future, and maybe a long-term low interest rate environment like we're seeing in Japan?
I have a different spin on this. I mean, a lot of people are saying, oh, they're going to raise interest rates and they're going to do it because the economy is improving. When I look at everything, I don't see the economy improving. I see it actually going the opposite way. And the reason the Fed is out there continually pushing interest rate hikes, I believe the central banking system, and this is what I normally talk about, the central banking system, they understand that there's too much debt out in the world. I mean, the US, Europe, there's just so much debt. And we could take Greece, for example. Greece has so much debt, there's no way out of this. And they're just giving them more debt, which means more people are going to be unemployed, which means business is not going to be created, which means people are going to have a harder time. And when the Fed is continually talking about interest rate hikes, I think what they want is a controlled, slow destruction of the economy. And when they're ready, they're going to bring it down. And they're going to make everyone believe that we were in a recovery. And what they're going to do, I think they will increase the interest rates and they'll bring it up, but a very small amount. And they'll say, see, we're on the right track. Interest rates are going up. Everything looks great. And I think what's going to happen is people will be like, oh my God, interest rates went up. It won't really affect that much in the beginning because whatever percentage they're going to increase it will not have that much of an effect. It'll have a little effect here and there. You'll see things start to fall apart a little bit. It's almost like if you go back to 2007 and 2008, interest rates started to go up. And if you remember, what happened to those people that had adjustable rate mortgages? What happened to all those people in California? They just left their homes because they realized, oh my God, I can't afford this anymore. We're going to see the same exact thing because those people who are buying all the real estate right now, who are just getting into the real estate, they're doing it at interest rates that are so low. A lot of them have taken adjustable rate mortgages because it's so low. And once the interest rates start going up, this is where we're going to see the problem. And I think what's going to happen is they're going to convince us that we're in this recovery and they're going to raise it a little bit more. And then we're going to see what I call an event occur where they're going to blame it on another group or country. They're not going to take the blame. They don't want the blame for the economy coming down. Because
I was going to ask you, the controlled collapse that you kind of alluded to, is that for the purpose of being able to buy a bunch of cheap assets in a timing or a time frame that they are controlling and that they are preparing for, being able to go in, collapse the market, and then be able to go in and purchase a lot of cheap assets? Is that kind of the idea behind this?
They will do that, but I think on a bigger scale here, they're looking at the entire world economy. Well, I should say the private Western Central Bank economy. And they know that this cannot be sustained. I mean, it's funny because John Kerry, I mean, we understand there's an Iran nuclear deal going on right now, and everyone believes it's about the nuclear weapons in Iran. And I've always said in my reports, this has nothing to do about nuclear weapons. I mean, Iran has been saying, or actually the U.S., and other countries have been telling us that Iran is creating a nuclear weapon. And this has been over for 30 years right now. But John Kerry came out with something very interesting. He said if this Iran deal doesn't go through, the dollar is going to collapse. Now, let me say, if the Iran deal doesn't go through, why would the dollar collapse? Because what's happening right now, and everyone has to understand, this entire system is based off the PetroDollar system. And what that means is each one of these countries, Libya, Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, and these countries as a whole, all their natural resources, their oil, is being sold using the dollar. Now, we see there's a lot of unrest in the Middle East, and a lot of countries are, like Yemen, where the Houthis are, they want their country back, and they might not sell their oil using the dollar. Now, if these countries don't sell their oil using the petrodollar, what happens? Well, they use gold, they might use the euro, they might use the ruble, they might use the yuan, they might use something else except for the dollar. If no one is using the dollar, then what happens is these other countries do not have to keep the dollar in reserves. There's no reason to. So these countries then will say, okay, I don't need the dollar right now to buy my oil, so I don't need to keep it. I'll stock up on euros, I'll stock up on yuan, rubles, just gold, and those dollars will eventually come flooding back. What they're doing in Iran right now is they're behind the scenes, they're making a deal to place their oil on the dollar to basically kind of take over their central banking system, because the U.S. needs to spread the debt. Well, I should say really the central bank needs to spread their debt further and further out, and they need more and more countries on the petrodollar. If this doesn't happen, John Kerry is absolutely right. The dollar will collapse. And this is what they're concerned about, and they tried all different ways to get into these countries like Iran, and they decided to go with this peace deal. Syria is a different problem. They want to get into Syria. They want to create a pipeline going right through it, and they want to take all their natural resources and put it on the dollar. This is why we're doing this right now in all of these countries, because they need to keep the system propped up. If they don't, the whole thing comes crumbling down.
Yeah, it's amazing. The more unstable everything gets, the more forceful governments need to become, and even going around the country trying to make deals and trying to prop everything up the way you put it. And of course, I tend to believe that within the United States, they'll start doing that with its citizens, and the way they will control people by keeping them in the dollar and keeping jobs here and doing all these things that will prop the system up and getting more tyrannical as time goes on. But moving on, talking about the globe and the foreign markets, with the issues going on in Greece at the moment, do you see the Greece problem blowing over and actually impacting our markets, or actually just kind of passing over and not really affecting the U.S.? Do you think it'll actually trigger anything that would be substantial and shake up our markets?
Right now, it looks like the creditors are working with Cyprus for the bailout deal. Now, all the European other countries have not voted on this to say, okay, we're going to go with the bailout. And it's really not a bailout. It's really more austerity on the people. And I think what's happening at this point is they're just kicking the can down the street. I mean, if we go back to 2008, when they were getting their first tranche of bailout money, they told us everything was fine. And then, 2-3 years later, they gave them another tranche. And here we are today, where things have just gotten worse over time. This is not going to solve the problem in Greece. Actually, it's going to make it a lot worse. And they know this. Even when Greece was going to default, or they couldn't come up with an agreement, they weren't even going to call it a default on the creditors. They were going to say it was a moratorium on payments, so they wouldn't have to pay out on the credit default swaps or on the derivatives. And the central bankers always seem to manipulate the rules to benefit themselves. They never do anything to hurt themselves, because you have to remember, the central bank system, they have no allegiance to a country, they have no allegiance to a people. Their allegiance is to themselves and to debt. That's it. Their product is debt. That's what they spread around the world. So in Greece, will this affect the U.S.? Eventually, because they will not be able to maintain what they have, because they're just piling debt on top of debt on top of debt. They don't have the revenue coming in to support any of this. And actually, all this debt that they're receiving doesn't go to the people, it goes to the creditors. So eventually, this will have an impact, and it will start to spread into Italy, into France, and we already see Italy and France, GDP numbers and everything else, unemployment is going up, GDP is going down, and their economies are not doing so well. And we're starting to see this spread throughout Europe, and it's just going to get worse. I mean, S&P already downgraded Europe and said, yeah, it doesn't look good right now, and their economies are not doing well at all. And eventually this whole thing is going to implode on itself, and there will be no saving it. And this is why they're trying so hard to basically continually prop up the system, because if they don't do this, if they don't kick the can down the street a little bit longer and the whole thing comes down, everyone's going to blame the central bank, because they're the ones who created the bubbles. They're the ones who bought up all the toxic real estate. They're the ones who did QE. They're the ones who did everything. And everyone's going to turn to them saying, okay, this didn't work. Why do we have the central bank? It just destroyed the private Western central bank economies. And they do not want to be blamed for this, because at this point in time, they need to reset the system. And this is their plan in the long run, is to completely reset what is going on here.
Great points, Dave. And I totally agree with those thoughts. It's an interesting thing because people are conditioned to assume that the system works, and when it does implode on itself, I feel like watching Greece, and hopefully that will educate people as to the failures of the central bank system, and then hopefully that will educate people enough to see what's wrong within our own borders, within our own country, and hopefully people can wake up to the future of what is going to happen here within the country. So having said that, for some people, the economy has gotten better in their own individual world. And I hate to say it, because for a lot of us in the know and who were concerned about the growing debt situation, a currency crisis, and were prudent about purchasing hard assets, specifically precious metals, over the last few years, it's essentially been a deeper depression for this group, because there has been so much money loss in mining stocks and precious metals. But I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this, and maybe you can shed some light on the government illusion of the prospering economy and where in fact it is suffering.
There are many people, and I mean, I need to go back to 2008 when a lot of people were losing their jobs, even before the crisis, when the stock market came crashing down in October. A lot of people were losing their jobs beforehand. A lot of people were losing their homes beforehand. And there were many people that were doing absolutely fantastic. So when we look at this, it doesn't happen to everyone all at the same time. And what we're seeing right now, and I keep comparing it back to 2008 because I see so many parallels, there are many people, even in my family, they are doing very well right now. They don't see anything. They're making their money. They have their jobs. Their paycheck is continually coming in, and they see absolutely no problem. Some people have investments in the stock market. The stock market is continually going up, and they're making quite a bit of money. People who have been flipping homes, speculating in the real estate market, they're doing fantastic. And this, what we're seeing right now, this compares to what was happening back in 2007 going into 2008 when everything started to fall apart. And what I'm worried about this time, where everyone is doing well, we have to think about what happened in 2008. Most of the country, about 38% of the country at that point in time, felt it. They felt something happen. They lost their job. They never really recovered. Yes, they got part-time work, or they got the same job making a lower salary. They lost their homes. I know a lot of people that lost their homes, but they never really recovered. And you have to remember, during this period of time, there were people saying, I don't know what's wrong with you. I'm doing absolutely fine. It must have been your fault that you lost your job. It must have been your fault that you can't get back on your feet. Now, all those people that went through it back then, who never really recovered, who might be working at a part-time job or a job that is the same but not making the same amount of money, they understand what happened. They realize what happened. And most of these people are saying, you know something, I don't want this to happen again. Now, those people who are doing well right now, think about it for a second. These people, I mean, I don't want anything to happen to them. I'm not saying that, oh, I wish this will happen. But these people now are set up for the next wave. And we are seeing right now with a huge amount of layoffs. I mean, if we look at this, Kraft Heinz laid off 2,500 people. I mean, we're looking at Lenovo, Motorola, HTC. They're all laying off thousands of people. I mean, Lenovo is 3,200 people. HTC is 2,200 people. Microsoft, they announced earlier, was 7,800 people. Qualcomm, 4,700 people. So what we're seeing is these people now are being laid off, which we saw prior to 2008 in October. A lot of companies were laying off. Now, these people have good jobs. They were making their money. They were employed. So we're seeing the same thing occur right now. And what's eventually going to happen when this whole thing starts to fall apart, a lot of these people are going to feel it. And they're going to be scratching their heads going, what just happened? Now, I'll give you an example. When back in 2008, I was actually prior to that, I was 2007, I was trying to sell my home. And traffic from my house just dried up. There were a lot of people in my company that were being laid off. And of course, back then you think, okay, they're going through layoffs. It's not a big deal. It will never hit me. And eventually it did hit me. But during that time period, people were saying, oh, it has to be you. I'm still doing well. You can't sell your house because you didn't you didn't plant flowers. You didn't get it staged. But no one really understood what was really going on in the economy. And we're seeing the same thing happen right now. Those people who are doing well, those people who are bringing in money, those people who are living in their homes, those people who haven't even tried to get a different job, they don't understand what's really going on. And eventually what's going to happen, it will start to hit all of these people. We're already starting to see it. I mean, just from the beginning of this year to now, the amount of layoffs, and I'm not talking about these low-paying jobs, I'm talking about high-paying corporate jobs. They're just gone.
Dave, I think both these things are actually related, but I'm going to move over into real estate. And this is a selfish question for me because I want to buy some real estate at some really good prices, and I feel like the real estate market is overvalued at the moment. And I know you've done some research on this in the real estate market. And why are the fundamentals right now so bad for the real estate market in America?
Well, right now, this real estate market is basically one big bubble created by the Fed. And when we go back to 2013, a lot of people might not remember this, but you'll see, if you go into YouTube, you can look it up, President Obama, he was in Phoenix, Arizona, and he was telling us how we're in this real estate recovery, how everything is fantastic, and this was back in 2013 of August. In September of that same year, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citibank, they were laying, and you can look this up on Google, they were laying off tens of thousands of people in their mortgage departments. So you have to scratch your head. Now, if he's telling us the real estate industry is recovering, why are they laying off thousands upon thousands of people in their mortgage departments? Because to me, if the real estate market is recovering, that means more people are going to take out mortgages. But what we really see, and when we look past the headlines and all that other stuff, we see that the purchases are coming from investment companies, hedge funds, and they are paying in cash. They're instructed to purchase these homes, not one or two, thousands of homes, and keep them. Do not put them back on the market. Rent them if you can. Foreclosures on the banks that are holding foreclosures, were instructed not to release the homes and put them on the market. Why do they do this? Because they wanted to drive the prices up. They thought if they drove the prices up, people would think the real estate market was recovering. And people would come out and start to purchase homes. So going forward to right now, and I've looked at the East, I looked at the South, the Midwest, the West, and I'm looking at all different parts of the country, and I'm starting to see things that remind me of 2007, 2008. And as we go through the summer, and everyone knows, maybe everyone doesn't know, but usually the summer is the very hot season for real estate. People want to sell their homes. Their kids are going to be starting school in September. They want to get into their home. It's a great time. It's warm. Everything looks green. Flowers are out. And people are normally in a good mood to go out and purchase a home. And now we're in August, and mortgage applications are continually declining. The prices on homes, even Case-Shiller has realized from its market survey that the prices of homes right now are starting to fall. Now, I'm looking at different areas, and I noticed, and actually my sister is selling her home, and right now she's lowered her price already once. I know another person that is selling their home, and they're on their third go-around for lowering their price, and they have not received any offers. I've seen this before, and it's not happening just in one area. It's happening in many different areas. Is it happening across the country? No, it doesn't happen all at once across the country. It starts to spread very slowly. I'll give you an example. Back in 2007, going into 2008, when I was selling my home, I was chasing the market down, and the realtors, they had no clue what was going on. And I spoke to my sister-in-law in Florida, who said, I don't know what you're talking about. We are so busy down here. It's ridiculous. She was a realtor. I'm writing contracts left and right. I can't keep up. Well, 6 to 8 months later, guess what? It completely dried up. I am seeing the same thing happen. And I track a couple of homes in different areas to see how much they come down. Now, I saw a house that went from $800,000, and this was a beautiful home, all the way down to $690,000. They finally got an offer on the house at $650,000. So this was this year in June.
Wow. If you don't mind me asking, what area was that in? What part of the country?
That was upstate New York.
Yeah.
Right outside Westchester.
Yeah, I know California, it tends to be Nevada, Las Vegas, and Phoenix kind of setting the trend. Back in 2012, Phoenix really had that big surge, and it wasn't until 2013 where California had the big 20-30% uptick in the real estate. So it definitely has its moments where the country kind of has that chain reaction of events, and it definitely does seem like it is getting slower. And you made a good point about the summer being the hot time to buy, and this summer hasn't been that. Last summer was the homes were going off the market like crazy, but this summer it's just not happening, and it's really indicating a top. And what we saw back in 2008, going back to that, is that real estate kind of preceded the recession. It kind of was the catalyst for what started and kicked off the recession, and it's possible that we could see that again happen in 2015 and going into 2016. So having said that, do you have any hope for any of the presidential candidates for America's future?
Well, to me, it doesn't really matter. I'm not Republican, Democrat. When I speak to people on my reports, and when I just want things to be done for the people. That's it. I mean, if you're working for the people, I'm good with it. And what I feel right now is all these, even Trump, I know everyone's like, oh, look at Trump, look at this, look at that. What I see is they sound great before they're in office. But once they get into office, things change dramatically. And I don't look at the surface. If you ever noticed, when each president gets into office, they really never change anything in the background, only on the surface. And they always keep the Fed, all those people in place, or if they're going to change them out, it's always the same type of person. It's never really a big change because they're instructed this is the way it's going to be. And I don't think the president at this point is taking orders, or the Congress for that matter, is taking or listening to the people. I think right now at this point, they are being instructed by foreign governments. I think they're being instructed from corporations because of all their the money they're receiving for their campaign. I think that the central bank instructs them. So at this point in time, I think our government right now is no way, shape, or form working for any of us. They're working for other entities to basically pad their pocket with money. And even with all the laws that they're passing and everything that they always bring up, you can always backtrack it to who is their biggest campaign donor, and you can see why they are trying to push a certain law or trying to do certain things. And I don't think it's in the best interest of the people. I mean, it's almost like TPP or Obamacare or anything else that comes out. When anything's a secret, I don't feel it's for the people. It's not something that we all want to accept, because if it was for the people, they just bring it out in the open and everyone would say, oh yeah, I like this. This is really good for us. But I think what's happening right now, and it doesn't really matter to me. I think the government is so corrupt that it makes no difference at this point who is going to be in office. I mean, a lot of people still believe that, Democrat, Republican, or, another candidate is going to do something. But I think they eventually, when they get into office, it's going to be business as usual. And so far, I haven't seen anything that has ever changed with any president that is in office.
It really is like the system is just too far gone, and the presidential candidates act like they have so much more power than they really do. They say all these things that they're going to do, but then when they get in office, their hands are tied more times than not. So there really isn't a whole lot that they can do to fix this situation. But with that, Dave, is there anything you're advising your readers and people who follow you to do at the moment to kind of prepare for what's ahead and to deal with the coming collapse within the global financial system?
I mean, I tell everyone to prepare. I use examples like Argentina, Venezuela, Greece. I mean, the Greek people, they knew eventually their banks would be shut down. They decided to withdraw the money from the banks to have cash on hand. A lot of people did that. I mean, there were billions and billions of euros that were withdrawn from the Greek banks. And the same thing is going to happen here in the United States and throughout Europe eventually, because we see all these different indicators. I mean, they created the bail-in documents, the US, UK, Europe, Canada, New Zealand, Switzerland. They all have bail-in documents. So they know the governments are not going to bail them out. The debt is way too high, and we went through this already before, and we know eventually the banks will, I hate to say it, will shut down. And they will shut them down. You will not be able to get your money out. And so far, we've seen this twice now in Cyprus and in Greece. Actually, in 2016, in January, they will be able to do bail-ins in Greece. So we're looking at this right now saying, okay, we've seen this before. Maybe we should, get ready for this. And we saw it in Venezuela. We saw it in Argentina. I mean, food and other supplies are going to become scarce. You will not be able to find a lot of this stuff. And I tell people to stock up on food, especially toiletries. I tell people to have cash on hand, definitely gold and silver, not as an investment so you can trade it, the physical gold and silver, because this is a protection of your wealth. We know that China and Russia and the other emerging economies, they are going to start their own gold exchange and market, separate and apart from the private Western central bank market that we see in the UK and here in the United States. They're going to separate and start their own. So we see all these things happening right now, and I just tell people, listen, if you have someone who has diabetes or a heart problem, have extra medication on hand, make sure you have water, and I just tell people to be prepared, because what I see coming from everything that I'm looking at, and I see things accelerating, especially in the Middle East, I see eventually this whole cover-up of this collapse is going to lead to war. And we see things accelerating right now. We have to remember, the U.S. government, the central bankers, they know the system's coming down. John Kerry, I mean, I don't know why it slipped out, but it slipped. saying that the dollar is going to collapse if we don't make this deal. The dollar is going to collapse no matter what. They're just pushing it out a little bit longer to get a war started. And the reason they need the war is because they know the whole system's coming down. And we saw this back in 1929. We saw this previous to that for World War I, when each time, if you look back in time, we saw the complete collapse of the system. They pumped it up and they started war. Well, 2008, we saw this huge crash. They pumped it up. And what are they doing? Well, the U.S. is provoking Russia out in Ukraine. And this is from Obama, we have China contained in the Pacific. Actually, 60% of our fleet is in the Pacific right now. They have China completely surrounded in all the bases, starting from Japan, going through Australia, up to Guam, the Philippines, all bases, missiles, everything pointing towards China. And we see the Middle East right now, and we have to remember the authorization for war is just sitting there in Congress, which allows the U.S. to go after the Islamic State, allows the U.S. to go after Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, or any other terrorist organization. And eventually what's going to happen, since there's no traction to get this thing passed, they will do something to get it passed. And they're just waiting for the right moment. And I'm saying that time is actually short right now. I think we are definitely heading either this fall, and I cannot believe that we'll even go to the end of 2016. I'm thinking something will occur between this time period right now. I mean, everything that I'm looking at and how the U.S. statistical numbers and what's really happening in the market, they're completely separating, and I don't think they can keep up with the illusion that we're in this recovery, because Gallup did a poll, and they're saying that 57% of the American population believes the economy is going to be getting worse, not better. So things are starting to fall apart, and people are starting to wake up. They might not know exactly what's going on, but they know something's wrong. Because, I mean, I was just with family over the weekend, and they're really not looking at what's going on. They think everything is fine. But when I was speaking to them, they were telling me that they feel like something's wrong. They don't know exactly that I talk about this stuff. So, you know, I was listening to them and they're like, yeah, something's wrong. The stock market doesn't make sense. Some of these numbers they're coming out with doesn't make sense. I know someone that works for AT&T. Sales are down and they're cutting commissions on certain salespeople. And they're saying, yeah, something is going on with the economy. Something's not right. And I'm not making as much as I used to. So people are starting to feel it. They realize something's going on. And I think we're heading down into this period where things are going to accelerate as we get into the fall and winter and moving forward. And a lot of people say it's going to happen in this September or October. I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but I'm looking at all these things and everything's starting to mirror 2008 right now, and it's getting me a little bit nervous that it's going to happen very, very soon.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons to be prepared and to be prepared for the imminent future. Dave, I want to thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate it, and I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. If people want to reach out to you or find out more information about you, where would they go and what will they find?
They can just go right to the X22report.com website, and you can find everything right there. Or, I mean, I'm on YouTube. You can go to YouTube, just type in X22 Report, and it'll bring you right to my YouTube channel. Those are the two easiest ways to get to me.
Thanks so much, Dave.
Thank you very much for having me.